We are just going to hop right into our next session. I know you guys are familiar with Netflix. Everyone's familiar with gaming, so there should be no huge surprises here. We're going to bring on the former Facebook head of gaming, or head of Facebook gaming, Mike Verdu, who is now with Netflix and leading the charge for their gaming efforts, and your moderator, Lucas Matney. Please welcome them to the stage.
Hey, everybody. Hope you had a nice lunch. So we're talking a little bit about Netflix today. So the pandemic was obviously a very pivotal time for Netflix. It was a pivotal time for gaming. It seems like Netflix is in kind of a transitional period at the moment. When you look at gaming, where does that fit into everything there?
It's a very natural extension for Netflix. Netflix is like perfectly balanced between technology and creativity and entertainment. And games are a mix of art and science. So it made sense for us to look at that as the next vertical. And the company is just sort of built to make it happen. So it just made sense.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I can see like the vision on the board, like entertainment, there are all these broad categories, gaming, obviously a huge market. But, it's not like you're a Twitch or a YouTube gaming looking to also have games on your platforms. Like this is a very new community that Netflix is trying to reach. So how have you kind of gone about that, especially in the early innings?
So the reason I came to Netflix was because we were aligning developer interests with player interests. Like it's been a long time since there's like this purity in essentially creators making things that bring joy and delight, whose sole purpose is to entertain, and the players. And really, Netflix wins if people love what we make and they stay. So that was incredibly exciting. It is empowering for game makers and creators. It's a message that's resonated. Like we have gotten some talent that we didn't have any right to be able to attract to a fledgling effort like this. And it really is like, oh my God, I can go back to my roots and actually serve experiences to players that bring them joy, and then that's it, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seems like gaming is so hard, and it seems like so many big tech companies have tried to make plays here and either haven't had kind of the financial commitment from the higher ups or haven't, been able to kind of stride along for years without kind of a clear revenue exit path. So I guess like for you guys, what makes it different?
Well, first of all, Netflix doesn't take very many big bets. Mm-hmm. If you look at the 25-year history of the company, there's just a handful of inflection points. And the company's very committed to this being one of them and understands that you have to be patient and that it's better to start small and be humble and grow into it. So I think the commitment is certainly there. And the approach, all of us who run the games unit at Netflix have made games. Like we have backgrounds in actually designing, managing, producing, creating art for games. And that's a big change. And for the company to trust a team that has essentially got its start in another industry and not just sort of rely on veterans from that company.
Sure.
And not insist that the Netflix way is the best way, but be open to new ways of doing things. It's refreshing. It's a breath of fresh air for me. I'm grateful for it.
Well, I mean, it's curious you say the Netflix way, because I guess if I was thinking about like, building a new TV show or a movie or something, in my mind, the Netflix way for a while was just they had a massive content budget. You could like approach the team and you had a pretty good shot of like getting a deal done with Netflix just because they're investing so much in original content. Like, did you know from the beginning that wasn't going to be the same approach for gaming, where it was going to be like, you're dropping like billions per like half? I mean, that sounds hard to do, but it also sounds like something they could have conceivably wanted to do.
I think the technology side of Netflix is a tech company, and that comes with a whole bunch of culture, ways of doing things, ways of organizing that are potentially at odds with making games, and the company's been really good about letting us essentially chart a course that makes us different in some places. Because we're not a Hollywood studio, and we're not a classic tech company. We actually live somewhere in the middle.
Why, like, I talked to a few people about doing this interview, and most of their responses were, "Oh, I didn't know Netflix was doing gaming." When you're like looking at, well, say, a product like YouTube or something, where like you go on it and there's like a unrelentless amount of traffic being drawn to their premium subscription product or something like that, where they just like hit you with a pop-up every time you load the site. It seems like, with Netflix, it seems pretty low key in terms of how much they're trying to push it. Is that just because you're in an early stage and they want to have things like mature slowly, or is it a lack of commitment?
It's a learning organization. And I was actually coming in fresh to Netflix, a little bit terrified that we would launch this very basic offering with 5 games to an audience that's come to expect the world from Netflix. Very high production values and incredible variety. And Greg, who's the COO, my boss, said, people don't remember the 5 years of streaming before House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, but that was a period where the company was learning. And our members will go along on the journey with us. We start small. We learn, we add games, and we're just very clear and humble about the way we communicate with our members. And we have been. So look, we're starting small. These are some very basic licensed games at the outset. We will add more over time, and you'll come along on the journey with us, but it is going to be a long journey. And here we are, almost a year later. We've got 35 games on the service. And you're starting to see a shift from just the games we licensed that had a life on some of the other platforms to games that you can only find on Netflix, whether they're mobile versions of games that were successful on other platforms, games built in partnership with us. Like, these are experiences that you can only get on Netflix. And that shift has really started happening over the summer, and now you're seeing more and more games like that launch. And then, I think you'll see the richness of our offering increase over the next year and a half. We have 35 games on the service now, but there are 55 games in flight, including 14 games from our fledgling internal studios org. So, the snowball's getting some momentum.
Give me a picture of like what type of game that, I'm sure there's a diversity of games across, those scores of games. But like, are you focused mostly on single player, multiplayer? Like, is this kind of the same type of game that might be on like an Apple Arcade or something? Are there in-app purchases? Where do you,
No in-app purchases.
Okay.
No monetization, no ads. And when I talked about aligning developer interests and player interests, that's how it manifests.
Okay.
I mean, we generate business impact by delivering delight to members, and the leverage there is in the billions of dollars, not in the incremental monetization that we would get from IAP or from ads. So that's really important. As for the types of games, we made a commitment to serve all members. So, variety is a core value proposition, and you'll find, even in our basic offering, we had Stranger Things, Asphalt Extreme, and a game with cats called Nittens, all living side by side. And each game resonated with a different set of members. And now our 35 games range from casual to core. There are some games that I would consider, indie darlings like Into the Breach, which is my jam because I'm a strategy gamer. But also SpongeBob SquarePants, Get Cooking, which we just launched. I mean, there's a lot of good games sort of side by side, covering all genres, meeting members where they are in terms of skills and experience.
I guess, like, if I was thinking about it, did you think at the beginning that you were just going to do a lot of Netflix IP gaming titles like a Stranger Things, or just like things related to the actual TV shows on the platform, or did you know from the beginning that that probably wasn't super feasible?
We never saw Netflix gaming as a way to get Netflix IP slapped onto games and launched to members. Where it makes sense to marry a Netflix IP and a great game, we will do that. But you saw the partnership we announced with Ubi to bring Assassin's Creed to the platform. You've seen us launch games based on other people's IP. And you've seen original IP, and our hope is the original IP will make its way over to the film and TV side. So, I hope over time that the balance is like 50% Netflix IP to a whole variety of other kinds of IP, original and from other sources. We want to bring delight to members, and we can't just think that that means Netflix IP.
Yeah, I mean, how do you get people to think like, when I want to watch a show, I have a Netflix button on my remote control or something, or like, I know to click the app, but like, I would assume that, even some of your core users are mostly just kind of like maybe watching content and then stumbling onto the gaming part, or it's just part of the offering. It's not necessarily, I think of flicks when I think of Netflix, not.
Yeah, the manifestation of games on Netflix is a row on your Netflix mobile app that has all of our games. And we're just now starting to experiment with different ways of surfacing these games to members. But over the long haul, personalization and recommendation is where it's at. Like, we can essentially take down a lot of the pain associated with game trial. Like, you got to install a game, you got to master the mechanics, got to figure out if this is something you like. What if we could match you with a game that you had a very high likelihood of enjoying? That's, I think, over the long haul, where it's headed is essentially matching members with games they'll
Sure.
love.
There are limitations on just like user habit side, but also feels like there are limitations on just like what the app stores allow. So, what are your gripes with Apple and the Play Store right now? I'm sure there are a lot because, you talk to the people at Facebook Gaming, and that's all they want to talk about, it seems.
The platform partners that we have actually been very good about working with us within the limitations of policy.
Okay.
Over the long haul, certainly hoping that that we can hew more towards a North Star of being, frictionless, accessible, and ubiquitous.
Because right now it's like kind of like a nesting doll of app store commissions for the gamers at the end, especially if you ever did go for like in-app purchases or like battle passes or something like that. Like that's challenging. And then otherwise, it seems like, making one big cohesive offering without any individual monetization within the apps is just, it's hard. And like, doesn't seem like Apple's been able to perform particularly successfully with it. And a lot of the other players are just kind of, it's unproven.
Yeah, certainly the other subscription offerings out there on mobile are getting some traction.
Yeah.
So, it's not as streamlined as I'd like it to be, but
Sure.
I think it's a foundation we can build on. And kind of in that vein, there's sort of two little tidbits of news to drop.
Let's hear them. What you got?
And one of them has to do with this North Star of being ubiquitous and accessible and frictionless. So we're very seriously exploring a cloud gaming offering so that we can reach members on TVs and on PCs. We're going to approach this the same way we did with mobile, which is start small, be humble, be thoughtful, and then build out. But it is a step that we think we should take to kind of, again, meet members where they are on the devices where they consume Netflix.
Now, cloud gaming has certainly had a lot of problems. We got Stadia, we got Luna, we got a bunch of other platforms that launched that nobody remembers their name because they only launched for like a month or two. Like, what did all these people do wrong? I mean, Stadia obviously was a huge amount of money sunk into it immediately, and they were like, this is going to be big.
So
And
Stadia
just
was a
ended. Yeah.
technical success.
Yeah.
It was fun to play games on Stadia. It had some issues with the business model.
Sure.
And that's, I look at the technology and say it worked.
Definitely.
For us, delivering games to your TV or to your PC, it's value add. Like, we're not asking you to subscribe as a console replacement. So it's a completely different business model. The hope is over time that it just becomes this very natural way to play games wherever you are.
Are you guys building like a gaming controller?
So just the news that we're poking at this is probably enough for.
but I guess, like, do you anticipate, I don't know, these aren't going to be games people are playing with like their Apple TV remote, I guess?
No.
Assumedly. Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I riff on Stadia more because there's just so much there. And I guess, like, I mean, to be honest, it was kind of clear it was going to fail within like 5 minutes of the keynote ending just because it was such a massive, like, it seems like you could just bankrupt your company by all the game licensing that you had to do with that. And then you couldn't do multiplayer with other platforms. Like, those are non-trivial challenges. So I guess like you had the benefit of just watching it all and being like, well, what was the stuff that you watched and you're like, that seemed like a mistake. I'm not going to do that when I try it.
I won't point to mistakes because that seems unfair. Like they took a really
Let's
bold
talk
gamble.
super vaguely about cloud streaming in general. What big players have made mistakes?
The thing that I thought was amazing about Stadia and other platforms is the kind of experiences that they enable that you really can't have any other way. And they saw that and started doing some work on an internal studio, but it just takes a long time to get it right.
And when you're talking about unique experiences, I think the biggest thing was like linking from an experience into the game immediately, or like no download.
Yeah, imagine watching a game and touching a button and then you're playing.
Yeah.
Like it had the potential to just beautifully marry these different ways that people consume gaming content through Twitch, through the devices that they're playing on. So
this was kind of a big question I had, which is I was curious why you guys didn't decide to go into the Twitch, YouTube gaming, game streaming thing first to get that community and then go into the actual games themselves. Is that something like you're still vaguely interested in, or is that's just not the audience that Netflix serves on the creator side?
Well, we had this vision that that members would enjoy actually interacting with the worlds, the characters, the stories that they came to love in the shows and films, and would come to see Netflix as a destination for playing games, and that was really the focus.
No game streaming
on.
stuff, really. Yeah, I guess just at this point, it seems like, you look at Amazon or something like that, like the amount of money that they invest in first-party titles and the amount of time it takes to make a great game, as you know, there are a lot of competing internal politics that probably lead to subpar things getting shipped at the end of the day. So I guess like as you build out your org and you hire people, like how are you trying to, focus on, like you said, kind of a more sustainable scale?
So I believe that creators are convinced that we have the commitment and the patience to get this right over a number of years. And we're getting amazing talent. We announced a while ago that we were adding an organic internal studio in Helsinki around Marco Lastica, who started 2 studios and made 2 hit games, and thought that his next game should come out of Netflix. And I'm pleased to say, again, a little bit of news for here, that we are starting another organic new studio in Southern California, this time around Chaco Sonny, who oversaw production on God of War Ascension for Sony Santa Monica, and then oversaw a portfolio of their games, and then was EP of a little game franchise called Overwatch. Like he could have gone anywhere. He could have raised money. He could have done anything, and he chose to come here. We are building a team around him and looking to him to help reinvent what games can be. And that when you say commitment, like you don't get people like that coming to your organization to build the next big thing in gaming unless there's a sense that we're really in it for the long haul and in it for the right reasons.
So I guess contrasting maybe TV production and game production, what made it that you felt like, as opposed to just licensing or like working with outside studios, that you actually had to go buy some studios or start some studios of your own to create gaming content? Like, why not just go a pure licensing route?
Well, I think that you need both. You need to harness the incredible creative firepower of the global gaming ecosystem, and so our external games pillar is as important as internal games.
Okay.
But with internal games, we want to build institutional competence. We want teams to go through multiple cycles together and essentially get like really, really good at working together and delivering great products. And sometimes the only way you can do that is to give them the space inside of the organizations.
You talked a little bit about, the kind of the weave of single player, multiplayer, like all these different aspects of gaming that people like. Your former employer, Meta, obviously, you got some experience doing exactly that, third-party and first-party titles with studios that had been acquired. Now, Meta seems very focused on the metaverse these days. We just watched it Connect. I'm curious, like, does anything vaguely in that vision align with what you think is interesting for Netflix gaming in the metaverse world?
So
I don't entirely know what it means, and I'm curious if you have individual thoughts on it.
So also just to clarify, I headed up content for Oculus, so I was in the AR/VR world, not Facebook gaming, which kind of lived in a different part of the org. So you're going to get the perspective informed by that. So I actually think that the William Gibson quote that I used actually at a Meta Connect event applies to this topic, which is that the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. I think the roots of what people think of as the metaverse actually go back to playing D&D around the kitchen table. You're having kind of an emergent shared experience with friends. And then there's like this line you can trace from those early experiences all the way to Minecraft and Roblox, and even games like Animal Crossing and open world console games, where the game maker is giving you an environment to essentially share a story with your friends. It creates an interesting environment to have stories. I've never played EVE Online, but oh my God, do I read about the shit that goes down in that game. Like, it is amazing. You see these glimmers in multiple places, and we're absolutely gonna lean into games that create communities, that create environments where people can have interesting experiences with their friends, and essentially, they become the stars of their own movies, or the heroes of their own stories. Yeah.
Going back a little bit to the App Store and Play Store stuff. I mean, generally when you like talk to an emerging gaming platform, they're either thinking about hardware in the future, or they already have a hardware platform, or they're like have OS level control, because if you don't, then you don't get to make any of the rules, and gaming is such a cash cow that all these companies kind of want to ensure that, they keep a nice stranglehold on how that works. So I guess I'm assuming, you didn't say anything about the controller, but I'm assuming Netflix isn't coming out with PCs or phones anytime soon, but who knows. But ultimately, it's a big challenge unless you kind of are really close to the silicon or are operating an operating system, which seems a little out of pocket for Netflix.
Well, from my perspective, we needed a platform on mobile that was good enough so that if we had a hit game, members could connect with it and play. And I think we have that. We have a foundation. We can build on that foundation. There's a lot of things we can do on our platform to surface these games and connect members with them. And then the extension into cloud is really about reaching the other devices where people experience Netflix, so that it becomes this ubiquitous, accessible world. So it's not like a race to try and have our own physical device. I don't think it's about that at all.
Okay.
It's really about making sure that through partnerships or through developing the technology ourselves, we reach members where they are and we give them great experiences.
A couple last questions as we wrap things up. I mean, when you were at Meta and at Oculus, obviously Zuckerberg had this kind of it's a 10-year vision for putting our headsets in billion heads or whatever. But do you have how long is it going to take for Netflix gaming to become a significant part of revenue generation? Do you have any broad predictions or thoughts there?
We have said it's a long journey. It's going to take years, and we're very open about that.
110, 1050, 50, 100. 100 seems pretty far out.
Certainly a few years.
Okay, all right, I'll go with that. So, wrapping things up, we chatted a lot about VR backstage. I'm curious, do you have any ambitions to integrate VR into Netflix products at all? It's fun, but it seems like it's early.
So, to create a world around some of our IP that you could immerse yourself in and have essentially a story that's personal to you is like a dream. That would be amazing. I think what stands in the way right now is just the installed base for VR headsets is still small. And when I was at Meta and looked at the sales numbers for Quest and Quest 2, it's like, wow, we're making a dent. We're finally getting traction. But from where I sit now, the intersection of our member base and the intersection of the installed base for any one of the major headsets is still quite small.
Yeah.
So I desperately want to bring great games to VR, but a lot of us need to be using VR more before that's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming. This was a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with at Netflix.
It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.